fan of.
Das war jetzt nur Spiel.
Nochmal. Please.
Bitte?
Bitte, nochmal.
Das ist schön.
Shall I read this aloud? I wish to thank you very much for your last great letter, which so intensely and accurately described what had happened here at Organon in August, when we worked together on the sculpture. It was a very great experience to me, who had never done or participated in such work. To see the work of art grow out of the integration of an inner emotional expression and the perception of the same expression within myself. These things go to the core of the life problem. It concerns the movements of a friendly puppy just as much as it does concern the expression of thought or worry or what is called depth. Will you believe me that I am nothing but an onlooker in this drama, who tries as best he can to perceive, through your skill in a bit of clay, this manifestation, usually well hidden, though intensely active, is felt as the true I, when another piece of nature reveals its deep rationality. Permit me to deny that this expression of nature has anything specifically to do with a man named Wilhelm Reich. The battle is both basic and deadly. The best, W.R. It almost brings tears to my eyes to go back over these things and the sorrow that he went through.
I don't know whether I should, as a scientist, whether I should mention it, but I had either a clairvoyant or a telepathic dream the night before he died. Shall I go ahead with that?
Yes, please.
I dreamt on the night, I think it was on the night of the 3rd or the 4th of November, 1957. I dreamt that I was on an operating table and that was standing beside me on the operating table was Reich himself with another man whom I did not recognize at that time. This Reich did surgery on me. He opened my abdomen and he pulled out my intestines. And he strung them up, pointed to a spot, and then dropped them. Then turned around and walked to the door. When I saw he was leaving with this other man, I stood up on the operating table and said, "Where are you going? You opened me. Come and close me." So he smiled at me and waved goodbye.
Wilhelm Reich. Und
Was fällt Ihnen denn dazu ein?
nein, gar nichts. Nein, da fällt mir gar nichts ein. Gar nichts. Das hat meine Frau immer gelesen.
Die Funktion des Orgasmus habe ich gelesen. Ich weiß ein bisschen was von seiner Orgontherapie.
Viel Unanständiges.
Zum Beispiel? Orgon.
Was ist denn daran unanständig?
Das ist die Unzuchtskiste.
Darüber rede ich nicht. Ich bin da dagegen, ich bin da zu alt dafür. Ich bin dafür zu alt, ich bin da dagegen.
Bioenergetik war schon so seine letzte Lebensphase, wo er mit diesen Orgonkästchen gearbeitet hat, wenn ich mich nicht täusche. Das liegt alles lange zurück.
Reich. Also Sexualität? Sonst nichts.
La fonction de l'orgasme.
Ja.
Ein abtrünniger Psychoanalytiker, der in Amerika unter merkwürdigen Umständen existierte und schließlich auch verstarb, nachdem er sich unbeliebt gemacht hatte mit einigen Theorien. Ein bisschen was über den Faschismus hat er ja wohl auch gewusst, nicht?
Die Gesellschaft gehört therapiert und nicht das Individuum.
Ja, die Rede an den kleinen Mann.
Ja, ehrlich.
Ich würde sagen, dass es einer der bedeutendsten Reden unseres Jahrhunderts ist.
Und was haben Sie sonst noch für Gedanken, wenn Sie an ihn denken?
Nein, das würde ich nicht sagen.
Ich will mit dem kleinen Mann in mir beginnen.
Faschismusanalyse außerordentlich.
Ich verstehe Sie leider so schlecht, aber ich darf auch nicht näher an Sie rankommen, weil
Reagan congratulated teenagers at a rehab school in Westchester today for saying no to drugs. Mrs. Reagan told the kids there's a big, wonderful world out there waiting for them. Something students at Old Saybrook High in Connecticut might not think is too wonderful. The chair of the Board of Ed says she and her colleagues will probably okay a drug testing program for students who want to get into class. Hey, what's going on? Yesterday you said you were going to campaign for Andrew O'Rourke for governor, but today Mr. Hirschfeld surprised everyone.
Reich kam als Visiting Professor von der New School for Social Research und das hatte der Theodor Wolff damals arrangiert gehabt und Reich hat dann Vorlesungen dort gehalten und Gertrud und ich haben geholfen, die Lichtbilder zu zeigen, denn er hatte sehr viele Lichtbilder und die wurden gezeigt, sowohl von dem Laboratorium in Oslo, wie auch die Filme, die mikroskopischen Filme, die er schon gemacht hatte damals. Und die haben wir gezeigt. Als Teil der Lectures at the New School. Wir hatten Mäuse, die Versuchsmäuse, und wir hatten sogar ein paar Versuchskaninchen auch. Und haben aber hauptsächlich Mäuse gehabt, die wir mit Orgon behandelt haben. Und wir haben besonders eine Reihe von Krebsmäusen hatten wir, die konnte man kaufen. Es gibt Firmen, die sich spezialisieren auf Krebsmäuse. Und die hatten wir und haben versucht zu behandeln mit Orgonenergie und mit kleinen Akkumulatoren. Und es wurde kleine Kästchen für die Mäuse gebaut und große Boxes für Menschen gebaut. Und man saß da drin in dem Akkumulator.
So let's say a person or a laboratory mouse sitting inside this accumulator would be drawing energy as it would be concentrating inside the accumulator. The last organic layer would be the person or the mouse or whatever. And that would absorb all this energy that was being concentrated layer by layer in the accumulators. Gives you a basic idea of how that works. This is the larger accumulator, one of the first ones. The person would sit inside here for a few minutes, or 20 minutes, or a half hour on average, and have their energy levels raised up, basically. And the fact that this is not plugged in or anything is because this energy, according to Reich's theories, was all around us. It's in the atmosphere, it's in everything that's living. So this was just a device to concentrate it and to isolate it. And by concentrating it, you could give yourself a little boost. If you felt run down after a hard day at work, you'd sit in there for a half hour and you'd come out feeling a little more refreshed.
Is anyone keeping up with this today?
There are people in various places in the country. There's some in New York, some out on the West Coast. who are practicing offshoots of Reich's work, some of them more purely than others. There are some people who practice orgone therapy in New York State and still use accumulators in that therapy sometimes. Although Reich...
Doctors?
Yes, yes, there are physicians as well as psychoanalysts.
Also wir haben also Messungen gemacht mit sowohl außen in, das ist beschrieben, Reich hatte darüber geschrieben, was für mich besonders eindrucksvoll war der sogenannte Feldmesser, der das Feld der Menschen und alles lebendige Material gemessen hat. Zum Beispiel, wir haben Äste abgebrochen und sofort an den Feldmesser gehalten und da gab es einen Ausschlag und wenn der Zweig dann sozusagen tot geworden ist, da gab es keinen Ausschlag mehr. Und mit den Menschen, derselbe Mensch hatte verschiedene Ausschläge, das hängt davon ab, wie seine Stimmung war und also wenn jemand etwas deprimiert war, dann war das Feld klein und
lauter. Zurück zum A. Ganz laut, das A. Und nochmal.
Weil die Abwehr gegenüber der Entwicklung von Reich circa ab 1930 war in den letzten 30 Jahren sehr stark. Im Zuge der körperorientierten Psychotherapien ist sicherlich ein weiterer Teil seines Gesamtwerks, nämlich eben die Vegetotherapie, die Charakteranalyse, in die akademische Diskussion hineingetragen worden. Der nächste Schritt Reichs war, Vorgänge zu erforschen, die jenseits des menschlichen Vegetativums stecken und die nur noch mit Grenzflächenphänomenen an anorganischen und organischen Materialien zu tun haben. Was wir hier machen, ist also ein weiterer Schritt, um das Gesamtwerk Reichs nachzuvollziehen, zu überprüfen, sicherlich auch einige Korrekturen anzubringen, aber auf der anderen Art und Weise, auf der anderen Seite zu zeigen, er hat in grundlegenden Sachen, in grundlegenden Beobachtungen, im Widerspruch zu der bisherigen Schulmeinung der Biologie und Medizin Phänomene erforscht, die nicht bekannt sind und die möglicherweise immense Bedeutung bekommen könnten im Hinblick auf eine umfassende Diagnostik des Organismus.
Und warum glauben Sie, ist es so schwierig, das anzuerkennen von den traditionellen Wissenschaften?
Es ist gar nicht die Schwierigkeit, das anzuerkennen, denn wir haben sehr viel Anerkennung und Interesse bekommen mit unserer Arbeit und auch sehr viel Unterstützung, auch von Professoren hier in Berlin. Die Schwierigkeit ist, dass jeder mit begonnen hat, das experimentell und ganz und gar wissenschaftlich wieder aufzunehmen und zu untersuchen. Mit der Kenntnis der verwendeten Materialien, mit den Möglichkeiten, eine solche Apparatur aufzubauen und mit den Möglichkeiten eben auch nächtelang, wochenlang Präparate in ihrem lebendigen Zerfallsprozess zu studieren.
The bions are very easy to see if you know what to look for and if you're open to seeing them. Now that may seem like a very strange remark, if you're open to seeing them, but we have given many laboratory courses and shown people these bions, pulsating blue microorganism-like things.
And you have
and people look through the microscope and they say, I don't see anything. And I say, relax, take it easy, let your eyes loosen up. And after a few minutes, now I see them. Yes, they're there. Those are the bions. And people who don't see them either do not want to see them because they have a prior perceptual prejudice against seeing such things, because actually the whole discovery goes against, flies in the face of classical biomedical theory. Or they simply don't know what to look for. But they are there, and they are very easy to demonstrate to anyone who is open enough to look at them. And you don't have to be some kind of guru or transformed person to see these things. Any ordinary person can see them.
Daran hat er aber geglaubt und in der Richtung hat er dann auch vom Ende der 30er Jahre etwa an bis in die 60er Jahre hinein gearbeitet. Er hat gemeint, eine Energieform entdeckt zu haben, die angeblich, muss ich sagen, die Physik bis dahin gar nicht kannte. Die nannte er Orgon. Dieses Orgon ist praktisch, nein, ist identisch, ist dasselbe wie seine frühere vegetative Energie, die schon gleichgesetzt war mit der Sechswellenenergie und jetzt Lebensenergie heißt. Also Orgon ist die Lebensenergie, womit schon gesagt ist, dass Wilhelm Reich sich also zu einem Energetiker, einem, der also anhand physikalischer Vorstellungen und Begriffe an etwas nur gesellschaftlich Denkbares wie die Sexualität herangeht, hat er dann zu dem Springpunkt und dem Zentralpunkt seiner ganzen theoretischen, politischen, therapeutischen Arbeit gemacht und dann auch versucht, in diesem Sinne Hand anzulegen und mit dem sogenannten Orgon-Akkumulator die Menschen zu heilen bei bestimmten Erkrankungen, insbesondere sogar beim Krebs, beziehungsweise von ihren seelischen Verwerfungen zu befreien.
Durch den engen Kontakt mit ihm nun gemeint hätte, ich verstünde mehr als ein Durchschnittsmensch von der Psychoanalyse oder seiner Entwicklung der Psychoanalyse.
Also Sie haben ja gesagt, die Leute hätten zum Beispiel zum Teil gespottet über das, was er da gepredigt hat oder was er da an Neuerungen verkündet hat. Können Sie sich da vielleicht noch an Einzelheiten erinnern?
Sicher. Die Idee, dass autoritäre Herrschaft auch etwas zu tun hat mit sexueller Unterdrückung, war für viele neu und fremd. Und das lädt dann engständige Menschen dazu ein, sich über ihre Unkenntnis, ihr geistiges Unvermögen durch, wie ich es dort genannt habe, als ich mal darüber geschrieben habe, durch törichte Spöttereien hinwegzusetzen. Ihn zeichnete ja aus, dass er eben unter dem Eindruck der Machtergreifung Hitlers den Zusammenhang, wie ich eben sagte, zwischen autoritärer Herrschaft und Unfreiheit der Menschen auch in ihrem ganz persönlichen Leben, dass er diesen Zusammenhängen große Aufmerksamkeit gewidmet hat und die Frage der sexuellen Freiheit nicht mehr in erster Linie aus der, wie wir es aus der Literatur kennen, jener Zeit oder vom vorigen Jahrhundert an, als eine Frage der bürgerlichen Schichten gesehen hat, sondern dass er diese, wie wir heute alle wissen, dass er diese zentrale Problematik bezogen hat auf das Leben und die Erfahrungen der breiten Schichten, auf das, was Arbeitermädchen und Arbeiterjungens und überhaupt solche aus den breiten Schichten Beschäftigte, Bedrückte und das war dann eben ein ganzes Stück weg von der klassischen Fragestellung der Psychoanalyse.
Neue Freundschaften bergen neue Risiken, denn AIDS wird durch Geschlechtsverkehr übertragen.
Ja, die Form, auch den Inhalt als sehr provokant und nicht in Watte verpackt und nicht behutsam, dass man nicht verletzen will und so weiter. Das habe ich in der Tat früher gemacht, vielleicht auch heute, in der AIDS-Frage zum Beispiel.
Denn Sie reden doch zum Beispiel über die Liebe. Das ist etwas, was ich sonst noch von niemandem in der Form so klar und deutlich immer wieder gehört habe.
Ja, wovon sonst soll ein Sexualforscher reden, könnte man sagen.
Sie lassen sich doch auch im gleichen Satz über Ihre Kollegen aus. die das nämlich nicht tun.
Richtig, ja.
Na gut, also...
Ja, aber das ist alles noch im Rahmen des Wissenschaftsbetriebes, während Reich ihn verlassen hat. Reich ist ausgestiegen. Reich war, vielleicht können Sie es so rum verstehen, Reich war nicht mehr in der Lage, Diskussionen mit anderen Kollegen zu führen. Er hat gesagt, ich habe das entdeckt und so ist es und da war nichts mehr dran zu machen. Und er hat nur noch gelten lassen, und das ist nur bei fanatischen Menschen der Fall, was in seine Vorstellung passte und in sein System passte. Das wurde aufgenommen und die Schüler sind alle so von ihm ausgewählt und dann befördert worden. Anderes war ihm nicht möglich.
The reason why most people dismiss Reich is most superficially, not because they have any kind of emotional reaction against him, it's just that they've heard that the work is crazy, that Reich was crazy, that there's nothing to it, and they hear this from so-called authorities, and then they simply pass on the word. They don't have the foggiest idea, really, very much of what it's about. If you ask them to talk about it, you would find that out very easily. But there is a deeper reason why the work is dismissed, and that's the emotional reason. It's disturbing to people to hear about things that they have given up, that they have resigned themselves to being without. And most particularly, it's sexual pleasure. Now,
ein Experimentalphysiker von einem Max-Planck-Institut, also einem der angesehensten Forschungsinstitute im Land, hat zusammen mit mir diese Orgon-Experimente im Laboratorium wiederholt. Das Resultat war, wie wir es natürlich gedacht hatten, nach diesen genauen Messungen so beschaffen, dass von Wilhelm Reichs Behauptung, er habe eine neue Energieform entdeckt, nichts übrig blieb. Alle Differenzen, insbesondere Temperaturdifferenzen, die er behauptet hatte, auch mit seinen nicht korrekten Messverfahren festgestellt hatte, ließen sich mit den bekannten physikalischen Gesetzen eindeutig erklären, sodass das Orgon durch dieses Experiment nun doch auch eben experimentell als widerlegt angesehen werden muss.
And maybe these people will begin to entertain some of Reich's ideas. You know, Planck said that a new idea does not win out because you convince the establishment of its existence. It wins out because the establishment dies.
Come here. What's that? That's the accumulator, that's right.
Right.
Why? It helps you to feel better.
She was around 58, 60 when she died. I really don't know for sure. But I do know it helped her. She was on a deathbed, and they brought that accumulator down. And I think the first 2 or 3 times that she sat in the accumulator, they helped her into it. And after that, she could get in and out of it herself, and she was up and around. She was on her bed when they brought the thing down. And a very short time, she was up and around. And very shortly after they took it away, she just steadily went downhill, passed away.
There are 2 ways to use the accumulator, and one is locally, which was a small, what we called a shooter, where we directed a beam of it onto the wound, and that's the local use. And the other one is the general use of the accumulator, where the whole Aunt Lillian sat on a chair in a box that was slightly bigger than she. you see? So that's two different ways of using the life energy.
Yeah, I knew the one you used on me was the little one with the hose.
Right, and that was the original shooter, and I think I still have a model of that around, one of the original ones. But now I make a funnel, which is layered with these layers, and put it over all wounds when they first happen. And that works very well, then they heal very rapidly, as you noticed, without any scarring. And
my 2 days of scab fell off. I remember that distinctly.
It speeds up the healing, that's the big thing, and that's why you should use it.
From nursing school, an instance, I think it was our middle year of school, when the head of psychiatry of the hospital came to give a lecture on psychiatry to the group of nurses. And he began, of course, with Freud and talked about Freud's disciples. And when he was talking about Freud's disciples, he said, and there was Wilhelm Reich. And he was crazy, and they put him in prison. Or I don't know exactly what he said, but something to that effect. And I didn't say anything. No one, of course, in the class really knew, except for my one close friend that I drove back and forth with, that I was Wilhelm Reich's granddaughter, and the teachers didn't know, and of course the psychiatrist didn't know. But I think that point, in a way, looking back, kind of made me realize that I was sort of in enemy territory, in a way, going into nursing school, and I felt great anger and sort of just the flush of emotion that you'd feel if you heard someone say such a terrible thing as gospel truth in a classroom. And I didn't say anything to him at the time, but I remember it very well.
And people didn't understand him. Now, when I first started work for the doctor, I didn't know what they was talking about. But I told the laundry house, so they had a lot of girls working in the laundry, women, and some men. And I told them, I said, when I get through here, I'm going to go to work for Dr. Reich. Well, one of the ladies, and one of her daughters working there, and one of the ladies said, gee, if you go for him, he'd have you in one of them boxes and you'll never see daylight again. Well, I told him that's just one way of leaving this whole world. I was going anyway. But, after telling me them things, see, I ain't heard them. I talked to the doctor for 5 years or 6 before I went for him, and I didn't see nothing about him. But, see, there must have been gossip going on that I didn't pick up until I said I was going to work for him. So after I'd hired out with him,
everyone that worked at Organon in the lab came to sit in the Organon box, and it was just frustrating to have so many people coming in and going out, and like it was a bathhouse or something. And so when the doctor found out about it, though, he was very understanding, took the accumulator up in the lab and used it up there. But it was nice over there some of the time. Peter and Kathy grew up together. They had fights and tiffs and everything, but they got along pretty good. I think she was good for him, so he wouldn't be selfish. I was just glad to move back home, that's all.
Ich sprach mit Templeton. Als ich ihn eines Tages fragte, ob er an Gott glaubte, sagte er, natürlich, er ist überall, in mir und um uns herum. Schauen Sie bloß dahin. Und er zeigte ins Blau vor den fernen Bergen. I call it life, but the people would laugh at me, and therefore I don't like to speak about it. Er wusste also auch über die Existenz der Orgonenergie in der Atmosphäre Bescheid. Als er mir nun sein Geheimnis verriet und das Blau in der Atmosphäre Leben nannte, gab ich auch mein Geheimnis preis. Ich sagte ihm, dass er voll recht hatte. Was er Leben nannte, sei tatsächlich die von mir entdeckte biologische Energie, Orgon genannt.
It was energy. Even the top of the mountains. You see that at night and early in the evening. You see almost like a blaze on top of the mountain, don't you know? The coming from the sun, maybe, coming up or going down. But right on the top of it, you see waves of some kind. And he says it's energy.
And he thought that would help people that were ill?
Huh?
He thought that would help people that were ill, who were ill?
Well, I don't know whether he's... yes, I think he thought that. I think he thought that it would help people, but he had to protect it. It was something that nobody else seemed to know anything about. And then you get to your body, and there's, people, even doctors don't know so much about you as you do about yourself, 90% of them. They might help you live longer, what I call pills and rub-ons, keeps people to live a long time. But I don't know whatever happened to him.
Do you know where Peter Reich is?
Yes.
Will you be able to see him?
Yes. You know him?
Where?
You know him?
Oh no. Oh no. Just by name. I guess I saw him when he was 10 years old, probably. Else Ollendorf, will you find her?
Yes. We'll meet her also.
All right. When you see her, I don't know how she will take this, but you give her my best regards.
I will.
I have pleasant memories of her.
Oh ja, oh ja.
Können Sie mir über den noch etwas sagen?
Ja, das war eine sehr unerfreuliche Geschichte. Er war unser Anwalt, er kam mit seiner Frau zu uns zu Besuch und wenn er also geschäftlich kam und wir haben sehr nett unterhalten und so und dann plötzlich war er der Anwalt, der District Attorney für die andere Seite und er hätte sich anständigerweise natürlich zurückziehen sollen von der ganzen Geschichte.
Wie lange haben Sie ihn vorher gekannt?
Oh, jahrelang. Er war von Anfang an unser Anwalt, seit wir in Maine waren. Also viele Jahre.
Und plötzlich war er der Anwalt der Gegenseite?
Ja. Und wir haben also... er hat keine sehr gute Rolle gespielt und er hätte sich ohne weiteres als von der ganzen Angelegenheit zurückziehen sollen. Und ich glaube, das allein wäre Grund gewesen, die ganze Geschichte, den ganzen Prozess als ich weiß nicht, wie man das juristisch...
And I can't even remember, he said something about, do you think I was a Judas or something like that? And I just said I wasn't interested in talking with him. And that then he wanted us to let the two young men camp on the property, which is something we don't allow. And I said, I'm sorry, but there are campgrounds nearby and we don't allow it. At which point Peter Mills sort of started telling me what to do. He says, "Oh, you've got all this land, you can do it." So I just asked him to please mind his own business. And that was that. I thought that was an incredible impertinence, to put it mildly. So that's the only thing I know about. That's my only contact with Peter Mills.
Zadnicker sagte mir, du, das mit dem Ödipus-Komplex scheint so richtig, wenn du es erörterst. Doch was sollen wir damit in unserem Kampfe für ein besseres Leben anfangen? Wir können doch nicht alle analysieren, um sie gesund zu machen. Die Gesellschaft und die Verhältnisse müssen wir erst verändern. Wir müssen erst etwas zu sagen haben, ehe wir gehört werden und mit dem Leiden Schluss machen können. Wir Arbeiter lernen gerne, wenn auch viele faul sind und zermürbt. Doch ihr Intellektuellen müsst es lernen, euch einfacher auszudrücken. Die wissenschaftlichen Fragen so darzustellen, dass jeder es verstehen kann. Und heute sind nur solche Fragen wichtig, die jeder verstehen kann.
Wenn ich als Psychoanalytiker arbeite, dann muss ich nicht vor mir sozusagen im Einzelnen die krankmachenden Faktoren der Gesellschaft aufbauen. Ich muss einen Begriff davon haben, oder ich hoffe, dass ich den habe. Manche Kollegen haben den weniger, manche haben ihn mehr. Jeder meint, er hat den richtigen Begriff von Gesellschaft in sich, aber ich muss nicht also eine sozusagen, ich kann nicht drauf starren zu sagen, bei der Familie musste das Mädchen ja krank werden. Ja? Wenn ich das tue, wird das Mädchen zum Opfer oder wird die Frau zum Opfer ihrer Familie und ich kann kein Opfer behandeln. Ja, ein Opfer kann man nur trösten.
So the archives now, the Trust has an agreement with the Francis A. Countway Library of Medicine in Boston. Now the Countway Library combines the Harvard Medical Library and the Boston Medical Library, and it is the finest medical library in this country. They now are storing those archives. There's no access to anyone except myself. And at the end of the 50-year period, which will be in 2007, these archives will become a part of their permanent collection. So that in this way, I'm hoping to secure them in perpetuity. So that's the situation with the archives. Meanwhile, we have done some publishing out of them.
Wenn Sie so eine Zeitschrift nehmen, wie das ja auch geraubt worden ist, Zeitschrift für politische Psychologie und Sexualökonomie, die ist doch ziemlich allein von Wilhelm Reich gemacht worden, unter den verschiedensten Namen. Ja? Also man weiß nicht, sind nur die Namen erfunden oder ist auch das erfunden, was drinsteht, also an dokumentarischen Berichten. Das ist zu einem Zeitpunkt, glaube ich, wo bei Wilhelm Reich, was ja wieder ein anderes Thema ist, also die Grenze zwischen Fantasie und Wirklichkeit zu verschwimmen beginnt. Wenn ich das richtig sehe. Also was bei mir vorher die Frage war nach der klinischen Verrücktheit der Higgins Crew.
Reich is challenging basic tenets of science. So that to think you're going to overcome this in some slapchat quick way, I think is extremely naive. And he certainly never thought he was going to. You know, Reich himself said, I can wait 1,000 years. He was well aware of where they were and where he was and of this enormous gap in between. And the great problem of those of us who are seriously involved and concerned and struggling with what is an enormous problem is a feeling that perhaps all you can do at this time, aside from protecting the work and seeing that it's not physically destroyed and that this place isn't physically destroyed, is to publish Reich's work.
I had to be there. Things had to be in my name. But I did not make the decisions. Matter of fact, the federal judge, Judge Clifford, really passed upon the injunction and all that sort of thing. All right, I don't know anything more that I could have done to have withdrawn myself from the picture except to resign as United States Attorney, which I wasn't about to do, see?
Mr. Mills, yes. Dr. Reich, another notarization is very important. Crucial document pertaining to what we call Baker phenomena. Do you remember that? Mr. Mills, I do. Dr. Reich, you do? Mr. Mills, yes. Dr. Reich, the fact that I want to establish here is only one. You were for 3 years, for more than 3 years, a good friend of ours and a counselor. Mr. Mills, that's correct. I was professionally, but not intimately. Dr. Reich, there was some private contact. Mr. Mills, yes, a cup of coffee. The quart, with cream and sugar in it? Dr. Reich, that's right. Dr. Reich, now, Mr. Mills, the problem which is before us here is this legal case. I think the court will permit me as a human being to ask one central question which pertains to the injunction, since you are the counsel for the opponent.
I'm driving from Stratton, Maine across to Rangeland, and I come upon an automobile, and I recognized it, I think, as his, or at least I recognized him. He's beside the road, and somebody's with him, and I stop. They're examining the leaves on trees, and he says that what they're doing is trying to see how far the contamination from an explosion that they'd had spread. And I know that at that point I thought, this is cuckoo.
Chernobyl, yeah? So the radiation accident, my first deed after that was to go and plant potatoes. You know, it makes me feel, I think it has to do with the 2 starvations that Austria had. When I was a little child, they had many stories about starvation, and it was always a game I played as a child, that the great hunger, die Hungersnot, yeah? And it was very important to me to have organic food that isn't sprayed. Okay, so let's go inside. And what he did was to bring a very small amount of radium, like 1 milligram, into a highly charged orgone energy atmosphere in the laboratory, and discovered that a kind of chain reaction started in the atmosphere, which was marked by first a flare-up of the life energy. That is, he got high counts with his special Geiger counter that he had primed with life energy. And actually the walls got hot, and there was a lot of flickering in the atmosphere, and we all got very overcharged at that point of the experiment. And that was followed by a phase where we were all exhausted. Like phase 2 was total exhaustion. Everything very heavy. We couldn't move, our limbs were heavy, and we all felt very ill. During the Orono experiment, the mice, which were exposed to this radiation, also became ill. Basically, the experiment consisted of each day bringing the radium needle into what he called the orgone room of the student laboratory. And on the 5th day, he discovered these high counts, and he ordered us all out of the laboratory. And then found that he couldn't get rid of the high counts. They stayed high, and this zone of high counts spread gradually many kilometers over a period of months. And he discovered that the properties of the radium also had changed. It no longer discharged an electroscope. And that meant that something had happened in the radium to change the radioactivity. And he called this new substance Aurore. And we worked with that substance for many years. But basically, it was a kind of personal catastrophe, because he just built up his institute and his buildings had moved them from New York to Rangeley, Maine, and very shortly after making this move in the summer of 1950, the buildings became unusable, so that we couldn't close the windows. It was the middle of winter, and you just couldn't breathe. You got cyanotic, you got blue if you closed the windows, and you felt nauseated and weak, and all the symptoms of radiation sickness. So we lived with our coats on and the windows open. After the experiment was terminated, he couldn't get rid of the after effect. And in essence, the whole team and the whole laboratory fell apart. in that many people fled, including me, and didn't want to be there anymore. And he felt it was a real emergency. And basically he stayed alone in this observatory building after that, and this big team that he had built up in the fall of 1950 disintegrated. And the buildings were not usable. And we tried all sorts of things to make it livable again, and nothing really worked. And that affected both the student laboratory and his own building, which was the observatory. So it was a catastrophe. And at the same time, the world went on business as usual, which disturbed him. And this Oranur effect is everywhere in the world now, and nobody understands it, because life energy fights nuclear radiation. Life energy does not get along with electromagnetic radiation. There's a counter effect. And the Oranur phenomenon, I think, is taking place in many parts of the world. People don't understand.
We do not understand what, to formulate the problem quite clearly. So energy develops and is held up by a soft tissue. Now, we don't know anything about it. We have to be frank and that is just because we don't know. So chlorosis and similar diseases, anemia, is somehow connected with the push of strong bioenergetic.
Du hattest die Wahl zwischen der grausamen Inquisition und der galileischen Wahrheit. Du quältest den großen Galilei, von dessen Entdeckungen du heute profitierst, am Ende seines Lebens durch Erniedrigung zu Tode. Und du hast die Inquisitionsmethoden im 20. Jahrhundert wieder zur Blüte gebracht. Du hattest die Wahl zwischen Verstehen der Geisteskranken und elektrischer Schockbehandlung. Du wähltest den Schock, um das Riesenausmaß deines eigenen Elends nicht wahrnehmen zu müssen, um weiter blind zu bleiben, wo nur offene, helle Augen zu retten vermögen. Du hattest vor kurzem die Wahl zwischen der mörderischen Atomenergie und der hilfreichen Orgonenergie. Konsequent in deiner Borniertheit wähltest du die Atomenergie.
Stop in expiration. By the way, please, be very careful when you observe a case to know exactly always whether the case gets stuck in contraction or in expansion. These are two completely entirely different fields. Whether he gets stuck this way after inspiration or whether he gets stuck in expiration, for instance, which disease is very typical for that.
Herr Galilei, bevor wir Ihr berühmtes Rohr applizieren, möchten wir um das Vergnügen eines Disputs bitten. Thema: Können solche Planeten existieren?
Eines formalen Disputs. Ich dachte mir, Sie schauen einfach durch das Fernrohr und überzeugen sich.
Hier, bitte.
Gewiss, gewiss. Es ist Ihnen natürlich bekannt, dass nach Ansicht der Alten Sterne nicht möglich sind, die um einen anderen Mittelpunkt als die Erde kreisen, noch solche Sterne, die im Himmel keine Stütze haben.
Ja. Und ganz absehend von der Möglichkeit solcher Sterne, die der Mathematiker zu bezweifeln scheint, möchte ich in aller Bescheidenheit als Philosoph die Frage aufwerfen: Sind solche Sterne nötig? Aristoteles divini universum ornatum seris mysticis et canentibus et firmamentis crystallini.
Sollten wir nicht in der Umgangssprache?
And the book, which is called Wilhelm Reich versus the USA by Jerome Greenfield, which has come out in more recent years, deals with the Food and Drug Administration's side of the story, because he couldn't get access to the archives to write Reich's side. And in that book, it comes out that the Food and Drug Administration spent $2 million in attacking Wilhelm Reich.
He was sentenced, what, about a couple of weeks later, wasn't he? I was there when the guilty verdict was pronounced. And he was shocked by it. And I can tell you about a personal anecdote. The only time I met Reich personally, I was standing outside, and this is the first time I saw Reich. I saw him at the trial, then I saw him outside of the courtroom. and he was talking to his followers, other doctors, and I was standing over the side looking at him, and I guess I must have been looking at him with great intensity. Every once in a while he turned around like that and looked at me as if he could feel my gaze.
All this stuff is lying as part of that court case, but never reviewed. So America has a huge skeleton in its closet, bigger than Watergate.
As a matter of fact, I wrote this in one of my articles. As he was walking down the hall, you know, the floor was made of marble, and he looked like he was skating. He just seemed so energetic. He seemed like he was just, you know, like somebody skating along and I just gliding along. I got very much that impression of him.
Cross-examination by Dr. Reich. Dr. Reich, how did you test those accumulators? Mr. Bauer, I didn't make any test. Dr. Reich, yes, not scientific test, but how do you know that it would work? Mr. Bauer, well, when I built them, I had to get inside to fasten the inside lock in the door. Dr. Reich, you had to fasten the inside structure. What did you then do? Did you put your hands in it? Mr. Bauer, yes. Dr. Reich, did the accumulator work when you thought it was good? Mr. McGuire, I object. The court, we are not interested in that. Dr. Reich, you are not? The court, no. Dr. Reich, thank you very much. Witness excused.
I'm Wallace Jensen. I'm the historian of the Food and Drug Administration, and I was the FDA's Director of Public Information at the time this case was started. Now, after almost 30 years, the FDA is continuing to receive occasional inquiries about these cases against Wilhelm Reich. These are the result of misconceptions originated by Reich himself, beginning when he elected to pose as a misunderstood and persecuted scientist rather than answer charges that he was the promoter of a medical fraud. Actually, Dr. Reich told the judge that he would not offer any defense because neither the FDA or the court had jurisdiction over what he called basic natural law or were capable of understanding his discoveries. The persecution myth has been kept alive by various articles and books, such as a biography by his former associate Myron Sheriff, a New York Times book review by Professor Walter Kendrick also accepted Dr. Reich's interpretation of his case. Now, I have no comments on the biographical information. It seems, in fact, to explain Dr. Reich's behavior quite well. Both of these writings call attention to the paranoid tendencies of Dr. Reich. Now, what needs clarification are the reasons why the FDA sought an injunction against Reich and then prosecuted him for disobeying the court's orders. From the outset, the FDA knew it was dealing with a very eccentric individual. He would have been of no interest to the agency if he had confined his activities to writing on psychology.
Classical music.
I feel it might very well have happened. Reich, and that's written up in the Sexual Revolution, Reich went through a phase of believing that nudity was healthy, you know, between parents and children, or others for that matter, and that if you kept the body always hidden, it mystified it. You know, it made it something very secretive or something to be ashamed of. I just, you know, apropos of that, I just thought the one art that has the nude body is art. You know, art celebrates the nude. No other, you know, people don't act naked, they don't sing naked, but the great paintings and sculpture are often of naked men and women. I just thought that was interesting. It doesn't have much to do with Reich, but So let me continue, because this is a very important point. Reich later changed that. He felt that the nudity of adults in front of children could be kind of overwhelming, you know, the bigness as opposed to the child's littleness. So he stopped it. But you see, this is really something that aggravates me a lot. Here, you know, it's sort of like saying about Shakespeare, you know, he got drunk a lot. You know, nobody has read his plays, or very few people have. They don't care about that. All they care is that he drank, you know, when he was 25, or he, I don't know, slept with a sheep or did something outrageous. And they keep bringing the story up again and again and again. You know, it's really a sign of a small mind. They don't say, you know, let's try to understand this, or look what this guy did. You know, well, he went naked and it has that you know, it's like reducing him to, you know, their size, or lower, because they didn't go naked with their kids, so they're better than he was. It's extremely annoying. And I feel Sturba.
Hat eine Paranoia gehabt zum Schluss. Das glaube ich schon. Aber Sie haben vorher gefragt, ob mir das ein fremdes Gebiet war. Sie dürfen nicht vergessen, dass ich damals doch schon Arzt war, also mit Sexualität doch schon zu tun hatte. Und dass ich Vorlesungen auf der Psychiatrie bei Paul Schilder gehört hatte, die mich ja für die Analyse interessiert haben. Und dass ich hatte von Freud gelesen, also es war mir nicht befremdet, sondern es war etwas, das mir eine neue Welt eröffnet hat, aber nicht etwas, das mich befremdet hätte. Sie waren in Milstadt am Land, und wir sind hinunter nach Milstadt gefahren über die Tauernbahn von Wungen und haben ihn dort besucht und bei den Reichs gewohnt.
That I seduced all my patients. I was a psychopath. I was this, I was that. Then finally, I had gone schizophrenic. That went on for years. You know that? You don't know that rumor of schizophrenia? Oh yes, that was spread by Fenichel. Oh yes. Now today nobody believes it. It was quite a thing, quite a thing. I doubt that you never heard that I am paranoid, schizophrenic.
Hat denn damals auch erzählt, dass er davon überzeugt ist, dass man sich vor Kindern sich nicht genieren soll. Gewisse Sachen gehören den Eltern allein und dürfen nicht mit den Kindern geteilt werden. Wir wissen, was für einen Effekt die Beobachtung der Urszene, das heißt des Geschlechtsverkehrs der Eltern, auf die Kinder hat.
Also Memorabilia heißt es, also Bilder.
Achso, Bilder von Nein,
ja.
Im Museum sind keine Bilder.
Nichts, ja, okay. Das habe ich eben gesucht und nichts gefunden. Ja, ja. Das zeigte, dass er doch auch ein Schüler war. Ja.
Gibt es überhaupt keine Fotos von Wilhelm Reich im Museum?
Nein.
An den Wänden nicht?
Ja, das ist okay. Ja, das ist schön.
Then you saw it was a great worry. In one letter, Freud expressed his assurance that no matter what people said about me, he would protect me. I don't know if you remember. That was about 1928 or so. Now this whole horrible thing burst out at the Luzern Congress. Do you want to hear about that?
So einen will ich auch haben.
Und da hatte Freud also widerlegt, und er hat es wieder nicht akzeptiert, und da hat Freud sehr energisch gesagt, wer immer wieder sich zum Wort meldet, der zeigt, dass er unbedingt Recht behalten will. Ich lasse Sie nicht mehr sprechen.
Das ist über Freud. Das zweite Mal war ich mit Sophie spielend in dem Garten des Großvaters, und da waren die Hunde mit Schaus, und wir mussten leise vorbei spazieren, weil er hat sich ausgeruht, er war schon alt. Also es war wahrscheinlich 1934, ja, in Wien, und er war schon alt und krank, Und man dürfte ihn nicht stören. Und da habe ich nur er saß auf einer Gartenbank und seine Glatze hat geschienen. Also ich hab nur bemerkt, ein alter Herr sitzt mit 2 Chows. Wir haben uns vorbeigeschlichen. Also es sind nicht sehr persönliche Erinnerungen. Aber er war sozusagen im Hintergrund meiner Kindheit. Man hat viel über ihn geredet oder ihn erwähnt als Lehrer.
Now, building accumulators came about in 1947 or thereafter. Mr. Ross, I should say 1947. Mr. McGuire, have you built any since 1950 on? Mr. Ross, no. Mr. McGuire, now who hired you, Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross, Dr. Reich. Mr. McGuire, who issued your orders? Mr. Ross, well, Dr. Reich, most of the time I had my orders from Dr. Reich. Mr. McGuire, who was the big boy?
Bye-bye.
Mr. Ross, Dr. Reich. Dr. Reich, I object. Mr. Ross, I would say it was Dr. Reich. Dr. Reich, I object to the term boy. The court, strike out boy. Mr. McGuire, who was your superior, Mr. Ross, at all times that you were there? Mr. Ross, well, I look to Dr. Reich. Mr. McGuire, you have always taken orders from him? Mr. Ross.
Well, there was many things about him, but I liked him as a man, honest. You know, whatever he said, whether it was good or bad, see, he was honest about it. What I liked about him. And of course, he asked me many times why I didn't leave him, but I told him, no, he was right. Just because we'd had a few words, that didn't mean that, you know, I wanted to leave him. So I'd worked for him about a year, so I'd really got acquainted with him, and when he had time, we would talk pretty much, but I knew where he was when he was busy. He didn't want to be disturbed. So in the morning, when he first came in, before he started work, see, you know, if we had anything to say, he would answer and everything. So this piece came out in the paper that they was going to put up this little moon affair, and someday I was hoping to reach the moon. So when he came in, before he started work, I asked him, I said, Doctor, you don't believe that we ever going to reach the moon with anything, do you? And he spoke right up quickly, and he said, oh yes, and soon now. I told him, I said, gee, I can't even visualize that, Doctor. I said, our fastest bullet travels 3,000 some feet a second. And I said, it's not very big. And I said, if you jumped right on the road on that bullet, you'd starve to death before you get to the moon.
When I looked up at the top of the mountain, just to the right of the top of the mountain, I saw 2 objects going very, very slowly. The sun shone beautifully on them. There was some cloud, but they were very, you know, they weren't, it wasn't a cloudy sky.
What you see is the downtown Montreal with its high-rise buildings. The closest that we see here is there's a reservoir with this kind of French chateau there that you see. In the winter, of course, you see it much better because the leaves are off the trees. But now it's a little more difficult. And you can see in the horizon various mountains. Yes, in that region is the Royal Victoria Hospital. Yes. That's the place where I worked, the 4th floor up there. I had the offices and laboratories.
I would have told you that I don't know whether they're real or not real. There are people, lots of people who have ideas about what they haven't seen. They'll tell you they don't exist. But the point is that I have seen UFOs. I have seen UFOs before Reich mentioned them. I have seen them in my lab, when I was in the old lab.
Unendlich weit zurück, könnte man sagen, oder unendlich weit raus. Und Reich stellt dem gegenüber hier die These auf und untermauert durch seine Pionexperimente, dass neben diesem Prozess der ursprünglichen Evolution ständig sich Formen von neuem Leben bilden aus nicht lebenden Formen. Dass es also einen ständigen Prozess von Strukturzerfall gibt, aber der ist überlagert durch einen spontanen Prozess der Neuorganisation.
But Dr. Reich had invented what he called orgone energy, a force unknown to science, except to Dr. Reich. This also would not have concerned the FDA if he had not gone on to develop what he called orgone accumulators. Incidentally swindling the victims of all kinds of disease, but especially arthritis and cancer. Sick people were being told that if they would just sit inside one of these accumulator boxes made of wood, sheet metal, and steel wool, they would be cured. Medical devices were subject to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which required safety, effectiveness, and truthful labeling. And Dr. Reich was flagrantly violating the law. Under the U.S. Food and Drug Law, it is immaterial that a mad promoter may believe in his outlandish product. The FDA did not have to prove that Dr. Reich intended to defraud anyone. Rather than prosecute him criminally, the FDA asked the court for an injunction.
We get $3.55 an hour.
He said he'd bring us an inch of rain for $1,000. And I said, it's well worth it. And the next morning he called and he said, Mr. Reich wouldn't guarantee an inch, but he would guarantee rain. And so we said, go ahead, just the same. So on the Monday morning, still was no rain, and he came through from Rangeley with his equipment and set up at Graham Lake. Right here, it was on a track, big track. He set it right here and ran something into the water, I suppose to ground it, and he picked up at noon and left. It was still clear, but these funny clouds are going. Then that evening, or that night, around midnight, we got a quarter of an inch of rain all through this section within a radius of probably 25 miles.
So he said, should I make cloud for you? I said, yes. And after working for 5 minutes, there was a big cloud. I said, could I come anyway? He said, all right, I'll get nowhere with you. Should I make it disappear then? Yes. I said, it sounds like I'm so self-assured, but we could have that kind of exchange. And then he worked some more on this cloud buster, and the cloud disappeared. And I said, congratulations. I'm a little less doubting of what you're doing when it comes to, working with energy, space, and all that. I believe in all our energy within us. I feel it might be, something like Reich always said, that this is something that the Indians, the philosophers, known for thousands of years, that their energy in the cosmos. And he sent me roses every week for it. So I went to see my family in Wisconsin, up in the Middle West, during Christmas, and I got so angry. I told Peter Malin this too. I was so angry that Christmas, I remember. 1 hour, and he's going to see if my body was well enough. I'll be stiff, like, you know, like, yeah, all tightened up. So I came down, and he said, go up in the room, therapy room, and undress, and I used my underwear. And I said, listen, I'm really very angry with you. He said, fine, show it. So I am not afraid of anger. So I was so furious. Listen, for 1 month, I've been having this hanging over me that you should take a look at my body and see if you want to figure out the word. He said, fine, keep going to it. Go into your feelings. So I did. So after 1 hour, he said, fine. So I went to therapy with him then for about that spring, 46. And then we become so friendly too. I got to know his wife. Because there was this Norwegian tie.
Miss Ohlendorf, I will read to you the title of books, and will you indicate to me whether or not they are books which were employed in connection with the sale, rental, and distribution generally of orgone energy accumulators, and whether or not they are the ones you recognize. They are The Discovery of the Orgone by Wilhelm Reich, Volume 1, The Function of the Orgasm, Volume 2, The Cancer Biopathy, The Sexual Revolution by Wilhelm Reich, Ether, God, and Devil by Wilhelm Reich, Cosmic Superimposition by Wilhelm Reich, Listen, Little Man by Wilhelm Reich, The Mass Psychology of Fascism by Wilhelm Reich, Character Analysis by Wilhelm Reich, The Murder of Christ by Wilhelm Reich, People in Trouble by Wilhelm Reich. Miss Ohlendorf, none of these books were used in connection with the sale of accumulators. Mr. McGuire, isn't it a fact, Miss Ohlendorf, that these books could be ordered by anybody who submitted the order to the Wilhelm Reich Foundation or any one of its affiliates? Miss Ohlendorf, yes, but independent of the orgone accumulators. They were issued and published by the Orgone Institute Press and were shipped to people who ordered them from the press, but they were not in connection with orgone energy accumulators.
Much ado has been made over the so-called book burning of Reich publications used to provide directions for using the accumulators. Again, the facts have been grossly distorted. In conformity with the law, as interpreted by the Supreme Court in various cases, the FDA charged and the trial judge agreed that the literature constituted the labeling of the devices and misbranded them. There was no other labeling, that is, no other directions for use or information about what the devices were supposed to be good for and so on. This literature was therefore condemned by the court and ordered to be destroyed along with the devices.
Some of these books never mention the accumulator. They were written before the accumulator was even discovered. So if you want to really consider this thing and begin to ask some questions, you end up saying, what was this all about? What was going on here? Really, it doesn't make any sense.
In diesen Tagen, wo ich Willi Reich kennenlernte, bin ich in der Nacht nach der Oper mit einem Leimtopf und Plakaten, die gegen Hitler waren, durch Berlin gezogen und bin die Stellagen an den Häusern hochgeklettert. Ich war ja noch jung und konnte klettern und habe Hitler-Plakate angeklebt, die erzählten, dass Hitler den Reichsbrand angesteckt hat, also durch den Lübcke. Der wurde ja dann gehängt von Hitler.
Am gleichen Tage, ich glaube es war der 5. Juni 1933, wurde die Arbeitersexualberatungsstelle des Wilhelm Reich in Berlin-Charlottenburg, an der ich an 2 Tagen der Woche als Schüler tätig war, um mit Gleichaltrigen über Sexualprobleme zu verhandeln und ihnen zu helfen, von SA-Männern, die sich als Hilfspolizisten mit Armbändern auswiesen, überfallen, und unter anderem wurden die Mitgliederlisten von ihnen gefunden und gekapert. Es war Schlamperei, aber so war es. Und da ich auch in einer anderen Organisation war, einer kommunistischen Filmgruppe, die am gleichen Tage von einer anderen SA-Gruppe überfallen wurde, ebenfalls mit Namensliste, war es dringend geworden, dass ich raus musste.
Now about the communists. I was never a communist in the usual sense. I was never a political communist. I would like to have that fully on record. Never. Oh yes, I worked in the organization. I worked with them. I believe that capitalism was bad. But I don't believe today that the misery stems from capitalism. The misery is older than capitalism.
Willi erzählte mir dann, dass er exkludiert worden sei. Und da sagte ich, also Willi, dann bist du aus der kommunistischen Partei gerade exkludiert und nun bist du auch aus der internationalen psychoanalytischen Partei, Verein exkludiert. Was wird nun? Was wirst du jetzt tun? Ich werde weitermachen.
Wait a second, let me read it first. What do you think? Yeah, she brought the book. She brought
Und da hatte Mussolini einen Text über Mussolini geschrieben. Und da war der Willi sehr begeistert über den Mussolini. Und als wir die Proben hatten, wollte er mitsehen. Und mitten in der Probe, er ist im Saal, springt der Willi auf die Bühne und macht den Mussolini selbst. Das war typisch für ihn.
Erzähl das doch nochmal hier. Hat er getanzt mit dir auf der Bühne?
Nein, getanzt hat er nicht mit mir, denn das war ja der Bewegungschor. Und wenn ich tanzte, habe ich allein getanzt. Und das war der Zyklus Die Mütter. Eine Mutter auf der Sonnenseite, eine Mutter auf der Schattenseite. Das kam ja nichts heraus aus Norwegen zu anderen Ländern, weder nach Deutschland noch nach Norwegen. Willy Brandt reiste heimlich von Norwegen nach Deutschland hinein, inkognito, um dort Berichte abzustatten, was hier geschah und was in Spanien geschah. Willy Brandt war ein Emigrant, den wir erst in Dänemark trafen. Da kamen zuerst alle Emigranten und dann später, als wir hierher kamen, war auch Willy Brandt hier. Er hatte hier bessere Möglichkeiten zu arbeiten. Er war ein sehr ruhiger, sehr scharfer und klarer Kopf und hatte eine innere Unruhe durch sein Engagement an der Politik, die er aber körperlich sehr beherrschte. Während Willi Reich die innere Unruhe selbst war und gar nicht daran dachte, sie zu beherrschen. Aber trotz seiner Unruhe wirkte er trotzdem ruhig. Und Kinder konnte er auch beruhigen. Weinende Kinder hatte er sehr schnell beruhigt.
And my great hope is that all little children that are born anew will be protected from this infection by what my father called the emotional plague, that they will be allowed to retain the loveliness and the outgoingness and the unarmored, free-flowing functioning that children have, the sense of truth, without being forced into armor. And I have many examples that I'm collecting now of how each nation on earth armors their children. They differs locally. So we can do something about helping humanity to disarmor. We can work to prevent neurosis, human neurosis, and the endless chain of contagion that's coming down to us in history, and the endless history of cruelty to children that converts them into grown-ups that are then cruel next on, handing it on.
This is Doc Doherty, and I think he's living in Portland.
He's doctor?
No.
No,
They always called him Doc.
I didn't get the name.
Oh, Doherty.
Ah, Dorothy, yeah.
Doherty, William Doherty. They always call him Doc, see. Well, all right, I believe he's living in Portland. He's a splendid person. Reich liked him, and he's taking Reich to jail there after the trial. And Reich had just left the courtroom, just left the corridor. He met me. He was handcuffed. He said, I'll never forget what he said. He said, Mills, you will not survive this. He didn't. The judge didn't. I'm the only one that did. No, I'm about the only one living now. Although this time, I had nothing to do with the case. And Reich liked him. He's a very personable, very nice man.
We're not trying the merits of anything in
Chief,
this world,
one of the deputy
except that
marshals.
we are going to justify the dignity of this court if we can, if anyone has violated
That's good photography.
Do you feel guilty somehow?
Not a
and
bit.
who did it. Jury verdict.
Why should I?
The Wilhelm Reich Foundation, guilty. Dr. Wilhelm Reich, guilty. Dr. Michael Silvert, guilty. Sentence. The Wilhelm Reich Foundation ordered to pay a fine of $10,000. Dr. Wilhelm Reich ordered to be punished by imprisonment for the term of 2 years. Dr. Michael Silvert ordered to be punished by imprisonment for the term of 1 year and 1 day. Dr. Reich, you were also aware that we never refused entrance to our workshops to anyone else. Mr. Magravite, that's right. Dr. Reich, you are aware of the fact that we have always said everybody else but not the inspectors of FDA. Mr. Magravite, yes.
And now he was being tried for violation of the regulation of the injunction, being tried for this. By the way, one of the things that keeps coming back as an irritant, one thinks even in retrospect of this certainly valuable human being, if not a great genius. I don't want to be the one to make that evaluation. That a cosmetic law or a labeling of cosmetics was used to destroy this man, to burn books, literally here in America, to burn books that had been written before he even started working with the accumulator, that was declared mislabeled, and it's just still a very, very difficult thing to accept that this is my government who does things of this sort. I still like to feel that my government is part of me and I'm part of it. It still hurts, even after all these years, to think of the difference between what we would like things to be and the way they were.
Right, this would be the view that he would have had from the visiting room in 1957.
If Reich was persecuted, it was by his own interpretation of the experience. That he died in prison was a coincidence, not surprising in a man of his age. The facts are all in the court record. His sentence, incidentally, included a recommendation that he receive psychiatric treatment while he was in prison. That's it.
Wilhelm Reich starb am 3. November 1957 im Zuchthaus in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, USA. Die offizielle Todesursache lautete auf Herzversagen.
Okay. Ganz genau genommen wollen wir nach Dobschanica. Das ist hier, das ist ungefähr 4 Kilometer von dem Dorf, wo ich den Punkt eingezeichnet hier habe.
Und was ist dort in diesem Dorf,
ja,
wo Sie hinwollen?
Dort ist ein berühmter Wissenschaftler geboren, ein Arzt. Und der ist in der letzten Zeit auf der ganzen Welt sehr berühmt geworden.
Wer ist das?
Dr. Wilhelm Reich.
Reich?
Ja.
Haben Sie Schwierigkeiten wegen dieser Tschernobyl-Zeit? Hat sich das hier ausgewirkt?
Hier bei uns nicht.
Meinen Sie, dass die Wolke über Sie hinweggeflogen ist?
Ja, uns hat es nicht so getroffen.
Also weniger als zum Beispiel uns in Deutschland?
Das kann ich nicht behaupten. Ich weiß ja nicht, wie es bei Ihnen in Deutschland war, aber ich glaube, dass in Deutschland war ein bisschen zu viel Übertreibung gemacht in dieser Hinsicht.
Zungen stechen